Welcome back, dear viewers, and as you've seen on your screens, the scenes in Karbala right now, it's reaching a point where Karbala is becoming packed out with visitors. From my experience, actually, when I was there during a 10-day period, up until about maybe 5 days before Arba'een, it was relatively empty. People were still walking, trying to enter Karbala, and most of the Zuwar actually you'll find within Iraq who visit Karbala, the many millions actually of visitors, is the locals themselves, the Iraqi locals themselves, coming from different cities of Basra, for example, or Nasiriyah, or Najaf, or Baghdad. The other visitors from outside make a small percentage, but there are still a percentage of the Zuwar coming into Iraq as a whole, from the outside of Iraq. So what we've noticed is that a lot of people come into from within the locals. They'll visit Karbala, send their salutations, stay a night, and then leave. Whereas with the people who come from overseas, they usually tend to stay for more than 1 or 2 nights in order to visit the different shrines within Iraq. And what you've seen from your scenes is it's getting even more packed. The atmosphere is getting much more charged up for the day of Arba'een, upon which Karbala comes a standstill almost. But in any case, in this part of Morning Baraka, we are discussing, or this part is verses of love, upon which we connect to the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. We connect to the message of Arba'een, of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and ziyarah in general, through tears, emotions, lamentations and poetry. On the topic of poetry, I am joined by my dear guest once again, Nouri Sardar. Assalamu alaikum. Nouri, it's always been a fascinating discussion with you. We've discussed so many things, be it your personal life into poetry, the reason why you write, the different techniques, the skills, who you write for. I guess today, because Arba'een is very, very close, I want to really take a deep dive into what ziyarah really, what the effect or the significance of ziyarah has on your writing and how that's changed over the years. Because you mashallah, you do ziyarah more or less every year, be it Arba'een or Muharram. So what significance has ziyarah had on your writing?
So it's funny because I still remember when I was about maybe 19 or so, I remember you telling me, you were saying when you go for ziyarah, your poetry is going to change like completely. Like it's going to you're getting into whole new worlds of poetry. And then it's funny because my first ziyarah, when I got there, dare I say, again, we've been speaking quite candidly, so I'm going to be quite honest. When I got there, I was almost a bit underwhelmed at what I saw in the first day or so, first few days. I think that's because in your mind you build this huge fantasized image that when you go to the shrine, you're going to die, or the sky is going to turn on its head. But what I realized about ziyarah, in my experience, is that it's not a massive impact there and then. It's something that grows on you. So the more you're there, the energy around Imam Hussein's grave and Abbas's grave kind of just like, it's like there's an imbalance in your soul, and it kind of balances it out for you. And that's what I find.
Just on that note, before you say that, actually, my first ever experience entering the shrine of Imam Hussein alayhi salam was
subpar.
Yeah, it was very underwhelming because you build this image in your head, because all the pictures that you see is just packed out with people. So then and within the shrine itself, underneath the dome, there's different sort of entrances and exits, right? So like one time I saw a shrine, I thought that was a shrine of Imam Hussein, so I was gearing myself up to really talk to the shrine, and then it ended up to be, I think, Habib ibn Madahir. And then there's another one where it's the Shuhada, and there's another one where it's like a different shrine. So when I did enter, eventually I realized this is the one, like this is the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. I saw like 2 or 3 people across the shrine or around the shrine, so I'm like, am I really in the right place? Is this the so when someone actually told me, this is the shrine, that's when I began to connect. But it was a bit of especially if you go out of season. So with Arba'een, it becomes very different, as you were saying.
I mean, Arba'een these days is just completely like, you can't even get close to the shrine, which is why I always try to go another season outside of Arba'een, so I can get like close personal time with the actual grave. So like I said, it's something that grows on you. I've also find that was very interesting is that each time you go toward, and this is leading back to everything we were speaking about before, each time you go back to Karbala, you're a different person almost. And then each time you leave Karbala, you leave with a new lesson. And that's something I've definitely picked up on as well. That's what I've done.
So, so how was your ziyarah experiences affected your poetry then? I know you go a different person, you come back a different person and all that, but What's that done to your poetry?
It's funny because there's also 3 different types of ziyarah. There's ziyarah arba'in, there's ziyarah muharram, and there's ziyarah off season. I think each one gives you a different vibe. I think when you go to arba'in, you learn about khidmah, you learn about service of Imam Hussein and what that really is, because you see the selflessness of the Iraqi people, you see the way they're serving Imam Hussein. That's when you realize what service is. When you walk into Karbala and your feet are broken and you can't walk anymore, but you have to push yourself to walk. You know, it's like we grew up in the same center. You know, we grew up doing martyrdom and all this kind of stuff. But compared to walking, it's nothing.
Yeah,
because walking, you know, you're the only insane reason to keep walking on your broken feet when you got sprains in your feet and you're tired is Imam Hussein.
Yeah.
There's no other reason. There's no other benefit to it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's an example of pure utter faith and selflessness. It's because there's no other reason to keep going other than Imam Hussein himself. I think when you go off peak, it's very spiritual. You know, you get some like alone time with the Imam. That's just beautiful. You know, that's when you do all your amals. You're there praying your rakats and just sitting there contemplating, and it's just utter heaven. And then when you go on Ashura,
that's another experience in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can understand what Ashura is until you stand there on the day and experience it. When you leave your hotel on the day of Ashura and you just feel the air is dead. You just feel death in the air. You feel what Ashura was. And it's funny because I still remember last year I was there, one of my good friends, and there was a big majlis going on in London, and we would see like videos and Snapchats of the majlis, and everyone saying, "Oh, this is so amazing," and then we were looking at it and we look at each other like, these guys have no idea what's going on.
Really?
Because like when you're there, it's and I still remember the year before that there was some sort of I don't want to get into it, some sort of controversy in London, and people were putting statements on Facebook and then God knows what. And I was looking at it, I was laughing. I was like, you guys have no idea what's really going on.
Yeah.
You know, when you're there in Muharram, when you experience Ashura there in Karbala, you understand. And I can't put it into words, I can't put it into poetry, but you get it is the best way I can describe it.
Yeah. No, so just going to your poetry aspect. I mean, you said that, you know, when you first started off, obviously there was a very traditional aspect. From my perspective, when you were writing, it was very descriptive, because obviously Jabir, you took from Jabir, so he was very descriptive in his nature as well. So that changed, but specifically going to ziyarah, experiencing those 3 different aspects of ziyarah, be it the arba'in or the muharram or the off season. How has that changed? Because you go every year, but your poetry's changed as well. So how has that changed?
So more recently, writing? When I started getting into spoken word poetry and stuff, and again, I'm going to speak very frankly and candidly. When I went for Muharram last year, and before I went to Muharram, I was like spiritually, I was just in a place of complete bafflement. Like, what's going on? What's the reason? And I was so scared to get to Karbala. I was so scared to what am I going to feel when I get there? Is Imam Hussein going to be upset with me? Is he going to say, you know, what you've been doing? You're not writing poetry anymore? Because I hadn't written poetry for months, if not a year at that time, I remember. Especially like Qasida poetry, right? Poetry nohas and stuff. So I was really scared about what I was going to feel when I was there. But again, like when I got there, and when I experienced visiting the shrine and sitting by the shrine, I got the sense of Imam saying, you know, it's okay. I get it, you know, don't worry, I know what you're going through. Like, but ultimately, you know, do what you need to do, but ultimately this is all that matters.
Really?
Yeah, walaya is all that matters. And it's such a, you know, we're so used to hearing it all the time, and you know, and we always think, what does that mean? You know, how can you say walaya is all that matters? How can you say Imam Hussein is all that matters? There's more to the world, you know, there's people making films, people are going to Mars, you know, there's so much going on. But when you I think the point is that, like we've been saying, it's the stepping stone. It's the foundation of what you're meant to be built on. You're meant to be built on walaya. You're meant to be built on Ashura, Imam Hussein. That's your foundation. Anything you do is an extension of that. But ultimately, when you come back to it, when you come back down to it, all that matters is the grave and the shrine and the azar. That's all that matters.
That's fascinating.
And it was amazing. Yeah, that experience was amazing. And leaving and coming back.
In terms of writing any poetry, what's your most significant poem about Arba'in?
So there's an event that Brother Sadiq Damani has been doing every year called the Evening of Grief and Sorrow. He does it every year, and alhamdulillah, I've been reciting there every year, and I try every year to write a new poem about Arba'in, inspired by, ironically, Basim, who used to release annual poems about Arba'in. And again, like, I can't pick out a specific one. Each and every single one, I feel, is is beautiful in its own way. The most recent one that I done, I'm just paraphrasing the words because I don't remember the exact chorus, but it was something along the lines of, the only time you won't see me in Arba'in is the day I've died. Otherwise, every single year I will be there.
Yeah.
And I know that when you go there and you don't see me there, it's
Yeah,
because
right.
I passed away. And as you know well, there's a group of us, a group of crazy individuals who, no matter what happens,
Oh, God.
go every year. I remember one of our good friends, I saw him there in Arba'in. I said, when is it going to end? He goes, 40/40s. We're going to do Arba'in 40 times.
Yeah.
And then when that happens, we can rest. So,
That's interesting.
yeah, alhamdulillah, it's been a wonderful experience. And again, like the walk itself, going on that walk, it's a lesson of selflessness. And beyond that, I think even on its most simplistic level, we live in a world of comfort. We travel to America all the time. It's very comfortable. You go to Australia, it's very beautiful, sunny weather, nice houses, nice cars. But you need to go back once in a while to the third world and and it brings you back down, to your humility when you see that people don't live, like we do. They live without electricity. There are orphans there. There are people who are suffering there. They're not living in comfortable positions. I think that's very important as well to continuously experience that. And I think that's one of the reasons, honestly, why ziyarah is mustahab so much. Because when you go there, when you put that effort in, and you're in the heat and you're in that discomfort, you've put yourself in a position of discomfort. So when you come back, you appreciate your life much more,
Yeah.
and you appreciate your blessings. Also.
Yeah, you take time out of such a busy and hectic lifestyle where you lose sometimes the focus, you lose the priorities,
Exactly.
you lose what's really important
Yeah,
to you.
and that's why I said, like, all that matters ultimately is walai. When you get there, that's when you realize that,
Yeah.
and it rebalances you, and you're back in the world doing what you do.
Yeah.
With that perspective.
With that perspective, yeah. Brilliant. Really, really appreciate your time once again. Essentially, our discussions are focusing on many aspects of poetry in your life as well. Just one last thing in terms of making Arba'in I don't want to use the term loosely, but making Arba'in modern in the sense that relating it to the non-Muslims from a poetic perspective. What would you say is the
I mean,
best
the thing
way?
is, just the fact that you have 21 million people walking and doing a march of protest, people call it, or a march of whatever, toward Karbala is enough for people to turn their heads and say, what's going on? I don't think it needs modernizing. I think, what is there is a result of causality of the Iraqi people and how they work. But just the fact that you have 21 people marching, that's a big deal. And what we need to work on is not changing that, I would say. What we need to work on is showing that to the wider masses. Of course, as you know, like in our cultural commemorations, there are some things that we just can't show to the wider world for obvious reasons. But this is something beautiful, and as you know, the media purposely turns an eye away from it for whatever reason. And so I think what we need to work on is not modernizing it or changing it. What we need to work on is bringing it to the attention of major newspapers, people who matter, people who are influential, and saying, look, here's 21 Muslims that are marching against terrorism, 21 Muslims that are marching for freedom and against injustice. That's a story worth telling.
Why doesn't it get the attention it deserves?
I think because the only stories that sell are stories that involve fear-mongering. If you're sharing a story about peace-loving Muslims, is not going to sell papers, unfortunately. I mean, news is about sensationalism ultimately, and that's what sells. And you can't forget. I mean, I was interviewing someone in America a few years ago who explained to me that there's actually a multi-million-dollar industry in America of different organizations, different companies whose sole purpose year in year out is to spread Islamophobia. Their sole purpose is to spread Islamophobia. So there's a massive, if not billion-dollar industry there, specifically there to do that. And there's lobbying involved. So there's a whole motive there. And we have to fight that. And the way we fight that is by taking the good that we have and pushing it into the mainstream narrative. Whether it be people, writing poetry, making films, making art, making documentaries, or even, getting jobs in these news outlets so they can help tell our stories. That's very important because I feel like a lot of us are stuck in typical jobs of doctors or pharmacists or whatever, and because we don't have a seat at the table there, I know that's a phrase that people don't like, but because we don't have a seat at the table, we can't tell our stories at that table. I think that's where we have to get to.
Inshallah. It's always been a fascinating time speaking to you, to Nouri. I can always learn something new, and of course love sharing some ideas and opinions about the latest when it comes to recitations and poetry and how we can really move it forward. for the rest of the community. On that note, the next segment from Zahra on Dia Ma'sooma is looking into questions and queries. So questions and queries from the audience with Zahra in just a sec.